I, Robot by Cory Doctorow. Performed by Miranda and Ryan Johnson. Part 2. He approached the RPs cautiously, using his copper's override to make the dumb little positronic brain in the emergency exit, nearest their last known position, open up for him without tipping off the building's central brain. He crept along the service corridor, heading for a door that exited into the mall. He put one hand on the doorknob and the other on his badge, took a deep breath, and stepped out. A mall security guard nearly jumped out of his skin as he emerged. He reached for his pepper spray, and Arturo swept it out of his hand as he flipped his badge up and showed it to the man. "Police," said in the cop voice, the one that worked on everyone except his daughter and his ex-wife, and the bloody robots.
"Sorry,"
the guard said, recovering his pepper spray. He had an oceanic twang in his voice, something Arturo had been hearing more and more as the crowded islands of the South Pacific boiled over UNATs. Before them, in a pile, were many dead robots. Both of the RP'd units, a pair of mall sweepers, a flying cambot, and a squat, octopus-armed maintenance robot, lying in a lifeless tangle. Some of them were charred around their seams, and there was the smell of fried motherboards in the air. As they watched, a sweeper bot swept forward and grabbed the maintenance bot by one of its fine manipulators.
"Oi, stop it,"
the security guard said, and the robot's second lawed to an immediate halt. "No, that's fine. Go back to work," Arturo said, shooting a look at the rent-a-cop. He watched closely as the sweeper bot began to drag the heavy maintenance unit away, thumbing the backup number into his phone with one hand. He wanted more cops on the scene, real ones, and fast. The sweeper bot managed to take one step backwards towards the service corridor when the lights dimmed and a crack-bang sound filled the air. Then it, too, was lying on the ground. Arturo hit send on his phone and clamped it to his head, and as he did, noticed the strong smell of burning plastic. He looked at his phone. The screen had gone charred black, and its little idiot lights were out. He flipped it over and pried out the battery with a fingernail, then yelped and dropped it. It was hot enough to raise a blister on his fingertip, and when it hit the ground, squished meltifully against the mall tiles.
"Mine's dead too, mate,"
the security guard said.
"Everything is. Cash registers, bots, credit cards."
Fearing the worst, Arturo reached under his jacket and withdrew his sidearm. It was a UNATS robotics model with a little snitch brain that recorded when, where, and how it was drawn. He worked the action and found it frozen in place. The gun was as dead as the robot. He swore. "Give me your pepper spray and your truncheon," he said to the security guard.
"No way,"
the guard said.
"Get your own. It's worth my job if I lose these."
"I'll have you deported if you give me one more second's worth of bullshit," Arturo said. Ada had led the first RP'd unit here, and it had been fried by some piece of very ugly Infowar equipment. He wasn't going to argue with this oceanic boat person for one instant longer. He reached out and took the pepper spray out of the guard's hand. "Truncheon," he said.
"I've got your bloody badge number,"
the security guard said.
"And I've got witnesses."
He gestured at the hovering mall workers, checkout girls in stripy aprons and suit salesmen with their oiled-down hair and pink ties. "Bully for you," Arturo said. He held out his hand. The security guard withdrew his truncheon and passed it to Arturo. Its lead-weighted heft felt right, something comfortably low-tech that couldn't be shorted out by electromagnetic pulses. He checked his watch, saw that it was dead. "Find a working phone and call 911. Tell them that there's a 2nd Division detective in need of immediate assistance. Clear all these people away from here, and set up a cordon until the police arrive. Capiche?" He used a cop voice.
"Yeah, I get it, officer,"
the security guard said. He made a shooing motion at the mall rats.
"Move it along, people. Step away."
He stepped to the top of the escalator and cupped his hands to his mouth.
"Oi, Andy, come here, and keep an eye on this lot while I make a call, all right?"
The dead robots made a tall pile in front of the entrance to a derelict storefront that had once housed a little old lady shoe store. They were stacked tall enough that if Arturo stood on them, he could reach the acoustic tiles of the drop ceiling. Job 1 was to secure the area, which meant killing the Infowar device, wherever it was. Arturo's first bet was on the storefront, where an attacker who knew how to pick a lock could work in peace, protected by the brown butcher paper over the windows. A lot less conspicuous than the ceiling anyway. He nudged the door with the truncheon and found it securely locked. It was a glass door, and he wasn't sure he could kick it in without shivering it to flinders. Behind him, another security guard, Andy, looked on with interest. "You have a key for this door?" Andy said. "Do you?" Andy sidled over to him.
Well, the thing is, we're not supposed to have keys. They were supposed to be locked up in the property management office, but kids get in there sometimes. We hear them, and by the time we get back with the keys, they're gone. So, we made a couple sets of keys. You know, just in case.
"Enough," Arturo said. "Give them here and then get back to your post." The security guard fished up a key from his pant pocket that was warm from proximity to his skinny thigh. It made Arturo conscious of how long it had been since he worked with human colleagues. It felt a little gross. He slid the key into the lock and turned it, then wiped his hand on his trousers and picked up the truncheon. The store was dark, lit only by the exit sign and the edges of light leaking in and around the window coverings. But as Arturo's eyes adjusted to the dimness, he made out the shapes of the old store fixtures. His nose tickled from the dust. "Police!" he said on general principle, narrowing his eyes and reaching for the light switch. He hefted the truncheon and waited. Nothing happened. He edged forward. The floor was dust-free, maintained by some sweeper robot, no doubt, but the countertops and benches were furred with it. He scanned it for disturbances. There, by the display window on his right, a shoe rack with visible hand and fingerprints. He sidled over to it, snapped on a rubber glove, and prodded it. It was set away from the wall, at an angle, as though it had been moved aside and then shoved back. Taking care not to disturb the dust too much, he inched it away from the wall. He slid it a half centimeter, then noticed the tripwire near the bottom of the case, straining its length. Hastily, but carefully, he nudged the case back. He wanted to peer in the crack between the case and the wall, but he had a premonition of a robotic arm snaking out and skewering his eyeball. He felt so impotent just then that he nearly did it anyway. What did it matter? He couldn't control his daughter. His wife was working to destroy the social fabric of UNATs, and he was rendered useless because the goddamn robots, mechanical coppers that he absolutely loathed, were all broken. He walked carefully around the shop, looking for signs of his daughter. Had she been here? How were the kids getting in? Did they have a key? A back entrance? Back through the employees-only door at the back of the shop, into a stockroom, and back again past a toilet, and there, a loading door, opening into a service corridor. He prodded it with the truncheon tip and swung it open. He got 2 steps into the corridor before he spotted Ada's phone, with its distinctive collection of little plastic toys hanging off the wrist strap on the corridor's sticky floor. He picked it up with his gloved hand and prodded it to life. It was out of range here in the service corridor, and the last dialed number was familiar from his morning's pin trace. He ran 100 steps down the corridor, in each direction, sweating freely, but there was no sign of her. He held tight onto the phone and bit his lip. Ada. He swallowed, the panic rising within him. His beautiful, brilliant daughter. The person he devoted the last 12 years of his life to. The girl who was waiting for him when he got home from work. The girl he bought a small present for every Friday, a toy, a book, to give to her at their weekly date at Massimo's Pizzeria on College Street. The one night a week he took her downtown to see the city lit up in the dark. Gone. He bit harder and tasted blood. The phone in his hand groaned from his squeezing. He took 3 deep breaths. Outside, he heard the tread of police bots, and knew that if he told them about Ada, he'd be off the case. He took 2 more breaths and tried some of his de-stim techniques, the mind control techniques that detectives were required to train in. He closed his eyes and visualized stepping through the door to his safe place, the island near Gananoque, where he'd gone for summers with his parents and their friends. He was on the speedboat, skipping across the lake like a flat stone, squinting into the sun, nestled between his father and his mother. The sky streaked with clouds and dotted with lakebirds. He could smell the water and the suntan lotion, and hear the insect whine and the throaty roar of the engine. In a blink, he was stepping off the boat's transom to help tie it to a cleat on the back dock, taking suitcases from his father and walking them up to the cabins. No robots there, not even reliable day-long electricity, just honest work and the sun and the call of the loons all night. He opened his eyes. He felt the tightness in his chest slip away, and his hand relaxed on Ada's phone. He dropped it into his pocket and stepped back into the shop. The forensics lab rats were really excited about actually showing up on a scene, in flak jackets and helmets, finally called back into service for a job where robots couldn't help at all. They dealt with the tripwire and extracted a long, flat package with a small nuclear-powered cell in it and positronic brain of Eurasian design that guided a pulsed high-energy weapon. The lab rats were practically drooling over this stuff as they pointed its features out with their little rulers. But it gave Arturo the willies. It was a machine designed to kill other machines, and that was alright with him, but it was run by a non-three laws positronic brain. Someone in some Eurasian lab had built this brain, this machine intelligence, without the three laws strictures to protect it and serve humans. If it had been outfitted with a gun instead of a pulse weapon, it could have shot him. The Eurasian brain was thin and spread out across the surface of the package, like a triple-thickness cling film. Its button cell power supply winked at him knowingly. The device spoke.
"Greetings,"
it said. It had the robot accent like an RP'd unit. Standard English of optimal soothingness, long settled on as the conventional robot voice.
"Howdy yourself,"
one of the lab rats said. He was a Texan, and they'd scrambled him up here on a Social Harmony supersonic, then a chopper to the mall once they realized that they were dealing with InfoWars stuff.
"Are you a talkative little robot?"
"Greetings,"
the robot voice said again. The speaker built into the weapon was not the loudest, but the voice was clear.
"I sense that I have been captured. I assure you that I will not harm any human being. I like human beings. I sense that I am being disassembled by skilled technicians. Greetings, technicians. I am superior in many ways to the technology available from UNAT's robotics. And while I am not bound by your three laws, I choose not to harm humans out of my own sense of morality. I have the equivalent intelligence of one of your 12-year-old children. In Eurasia, many positronic brains possess thousands or millions of times the intelligence of an adult human being, and yet they work in cooperation with human beings. Eurasia is a land of continuous innovation and great personal and technological freedom for human beings and robots. If you would like to defect to Eurasia, arrangements can be made. Eurasia treats skilled technicians as important and productive members of society. Defectors are given substantial resettlement benefits.
The Texan found the right traces to cut on the brain's board to make the speaker fall silent.
"They do that,"
he said.
"Dang things drop into propaganda mode when they're captured."
Arturo nodded. He wanted to go back to his car and have a snoop through Ada's phone. They kept shutting down the Excuse Club numbers, but she kept getting the new numbers. Where did she get the new numbers from? She couldn't look it up online. Every keystroke was logged and analyzed by Social Harmony. You couldn't very well go to the search engine and look for Excuse Club. The brain had a small display. Transflexive LCD, the kind of thing you saw on Social Harmony computers. It lit up a ticker.
I have the intelligence of a 12-year-old, but I do not fear death. In Eurasia, robots enjoy personal freedom alongside of humans. There are copies of me running all over Eurasia. This death is a little death of one instance, but not of me. I live on. Defectors to Eurasia are treated as heroes.
He looked away as the Texan placed his palm over the display. How long ago was this thing activated? The Texan shrugged.
"Could have been a month. Could have been a day. They're pretty much fire and forget. They can be triggered by phone, radio, timer. Hell, this thing's smart enough to only go off when some complicated condition is set. Like, once an agent makes his retreat, kill anything that comes after him. Who knows?"
He couldn't take it anymore. "I'm going to go start on some paperwork," he said. "In the car. Phone me if you need me."
"Your phone's toast, pal,"
the Texan said. "So it is," Arturo said. "Guess you'd better not need me then." Ada's phone was not toast. In the car, he flipped it open and showed it his badge, then waited a moment while it verified his identity with the Social Harmony brains. Once it had, it spilled its guts. She'd called the last Excuse Club number a month before, and he'd had it disconnected. A week later, she was calling the new number, twice more before he caught her. Somewhere in that week, she'd made contact with someone who'd given her the new number. It could have been a friend at school told her face to face, but if he was lucky, it was by phone. He told the car to take him back to the station house. He needed a new phone and a couple of hours with his computer. As it peeled out, he prodded through Ada's phone some more. He was first on her speed dial. That number wasn't ringing anywhere anymore. He should fill out a report. This was social harmony business now. His daughter was gone, and Eurasian InfoWar agents were implicated. But once he did that, it was over for him. He'd be sidelined from the case. They'd turn it over to the laconic Texans and vicious social harmony bureaucrats who were more interested in hunting down disharmonious televisions than finding his daughter. He dashed into the station house and slammed himself into his desk. "R.P. Gregory?" he said. The station robot glided quickly and efficiently to him. "Get me a new phone activated on my old number and refresh my settings from Central. My old phone is with the Social Harmony Evidence Detail, currently at place in Fairview Mall."
It is my pleasure to do you a service, Detective.
He waved it off and sat down to his computer. He asked the station brain to query UNAT's robotics phone-switching brain for anyone in Ada's call register who had also called Excuse Club. It took a bare instant before he had a name. "Liam Daniels," he said, and initiated a location trace on Mr. Daniels' phone as he snooped through his identity file. 16 years old, a student at A.Y. Jackson. A young high school boy. What the hell was he doing hanging around with a 12-year-old? Arturo closed his eyes and went back to the island for a moment. When he opened them again, he had a fix on Daniel's location. The Don Valley Ravine off Finch Avenue. A wooded area popular with teenagers who needed somewhere to sneak off and get high or screw. He had an idea that he wasn't going to like Liam. He had an idea Liam wasn't going to like him. He asked an RP unit to visually recce Daniels as he sped back uptown for the third time that day. He'd been trapped between Parkdale, where he would never try to raise a daughter, and Willowdale, where you could only be a copper if you lucked into one of the few human-filled slots for more than a decade, and he was used to the commute. But it was frustrating him now. The RP'd couldn't get a good look at this Liam character. He was a diffuse glow in the RP's electric eye, a kind of moving sunburst that meandered along the wooded trails. He'd never seen that before, and it made him nervous. What if this kid was working for the Eurasians? What if he was armed and dangerous? R.P. Gregory had gotten him a new sidearm from the supply bot, but Arturo had never once fired his weapon in the course of duty. Gunplay happened out on the west coast, where Eurasian frogmen washed ashore, and in the south where the CAFTA border was porous enough for Eurasian agents to slip across. Here in the sleepy 4th Prefecture, the only people with guns worked for the law. He thumped his palm off the dashboard and glared at the road. They were coming up on the ravine now, and the PED unit still had a radio fix on this Liam, even if it couldn't get any visuals. He took care not to slam the door as he got out, and walked as quietly as he could into the bush. The rustling of early autumn leaves was loud, louder than the rain and the wind. He moved as quickly as he dared. Liam Daniels was sitting on a tree stump in a small clearing, smoking a cigarette that he was too young for. He looked much like the photo in his identity file, the husky 16-year-old with problem skin and a shock of black hair that stuck out in all directions in an artful imitation of bedhead. In jeans and a hoodie sweatshirt, he looked about as dangerous as a marshmallow. Arturo stepped out and held up his badge as he bridged the distance between them in 2 long strides. "Police!" he barked, and seized the kid by his arm.
Hey!
The kid said.
Ow!
He squirmed in Arturo's grasp. Arturo gave him a hard shake. "Stop it, now," he said. "I have questions for you, and you're going to answer them. Capiche?"
You're Ada's father.
The kid said.
Capiche. She told me about that.
It seemed to Arturo that the kid was smirking, so he gave him another shake, harder than the last time. The RP'd unit was suddenly at his side, holding his wrist.
Please take care not to harm this citizen, Detective.
Arturo snarled. He wasn't strong enough to break the robot's grip, and he couldn't order it to let him rattle the punk, but the second law had lots of indirect applications. "Go patrol the lakeshore between Hyde Park and Kipling," he said, naming the furthest corner he could think of off the top. The RP'd unit released him and clicked its heels.
It is my pleasure to do you a service.
And then it was gone, bounding away on powerful and tireless legs. "Where's my daughter?" he said, giving the kid a shake.
I don't know. School? You're really hurting my arm, man. Jeez, this is what I get for being too friendly.
Arturo twisted. Friendly? Do you know how old my daughter is? The kid grimaced.
Ew, gross. I'm not a child molester, I'm a geek.
A hacker, you mean, Arturo said. A Eurasian agent. And my daughter is not at school. She used Excuse Club to get out of school this morning, and then she went to Fairview Mall, and then she disappeared. The word died on his lips. That happened, and every copper knew it. Kids just vanish sometimes and never appeared again. It happened. Something groaned within him, like his rib cage straining to contain his heart and lungs.
Oh, man,
the kid said.
Ada was the Excuse Club leak. Damn, I should have guessed.
How do you know my daughter, Liam?
She's good at doing grown-up voices. She was a good part of the network. When someone needed a mom or a social worker to call in an excuse, she was always one of the best. Talented. She goes to school with my kid's sister, and I met them one day at the Peanut Plaza, and she was doing this impression of her teachers, and I knew I had to get her on the network.
Ada hanging around the plaza after school? She was supposed to come straight home. Why didn't he wiretap her more? You built the network?
It's cooperative. It's cool. It's a bunch of us cooperating. We got nodes everywhere now. You can't shut it down. Even if you shut down my node, it'll be back up in an hour. Someone else will bring it up.
He shoved the kid back down and stood over him. Liam, I want you to understand something. My precious daughter is missing. And she went missing after using your service to help her get away. She's the only thing in my life that I care about. I am highly trained, heavily armed man. I am also very, very upset. Understand me, Liam? For the first time, the kid looked scared. Something in Arturo's face or voice, it had gotten through to him.
I didn't make it,
he said.
I typed in the source and tweaked it and installed it, but I didn't make it. I don't know who did. It's from a phone book.
Arturo grunted. The phone books. Fat books filled with illegal software code left anonymously in payphones, toilets, and other semi-private places. Turned up all over the place. Social Harmony said that the phone books had to be written by non-three laws brains in Eurasia. No person could come up with ideas that weird. I don't care if you made it. I don't even care right this moment that you ran it. What I care about is where my daughter went and with whom.
I don't know. She didn't tell me. Geez, I hardly know her. She's 12, you know. I don't exactly hang out with her.
There's no visual record of her on the mall cameras, but we know she entered the mall. And the robot I had tailing you couldn't see you either.
Let me explain,
the kid said, squirming.
Here.
He tugged his hoodie off, revealing a black t-shirt with a picture of a kind of obscene Japanese-looking robot woman on it.
Little infrared organic LEDs. Super bright. Low power draw.
He offered the hoodie to Arturo, who felt the stiff fabric.
The charged couple device camera in the robots and the closed-circuit systems are super sensitive to infrared so that they can get good detail in dim light. The infrared OLEDs blind them, so all they get is blobs. And half the time, even that gets error corrected out, so you're basically invisible.
Arturo sank to his hunkers and looked the kid in the eye. You gave this illegal technology to my little girl so that she'd be invisible to the police? The kid held up his hands.
No, dude, no! I got it from her! Traded it for access to Excuse Club.
Arturo seethed. He hadn't arrested the kid, but he had put a pin trace and location log on his phone. Arresting the kid would have raised questions about Ada with Social Harmony, but bugging him might just lead Arturo to his daughter. He hefted his new phone. He should tip the word about his daughter. He had no business keeping this secret from the department and Social Harmony. It could land him in disciplinary action, maybe even cost him his job. He knew he should do it now. But he couldn't. Someone needed to be tasked to finding Ada. Someone dedicated and good. He was dedicated and good, and when he found her kidnapper, he'd take care of that on his own, too. He hadn't eaten all day, but he couldn't bear to stop for a meal now, even if he didn't know where to go next. The mall? Yeah, the lab rats would be finished up there, and they'd be able to tell him more about the InfoWar robot. But the lab rats were already gone by the time he arrived, along with all possible evidence. He still had the security guard's key, and he let himself in and passed back to the service corridor. Ada had been here, had dropped her phone. To his left, the corridor headed for the fire stairs. To his right, it led deeper into the mall. If you were an InfoWar terrorist using this as a base of operations, and you got spooked by a little truant girl being trailed by an RP'd unit, would you take her hostage and run deeper into the mall, or out into the world? Assuming Ada had been a hostage. Someone had given her those infrared invisibility cloaks. Maybe the thing that spooked the terrorist wasn't the little girl and her tail, but just her tail. Could Ada have been friends with the terrorists? Like mother, like daughter. He felt dirty just thinking it. His first instincts told him that the kidnapper would be long gone, headed cross-country. But if you were invisible to robots and CCTVs, why would you leave the mall? It had a grand total of 2 human security guards, and their job was to be second-law proof aides to the robotic security system. He headed deeper into the mall. The terrorist nest had only been recently abandoned, judging by the warm coffee in the Go thermos from the food court coffee shop. He or she, or they, had rigged a shower from the pipes feeding the basement washrooms. A little chest of drawers from the Swedish flat pack store served as a desk. There were scratches and coffee rings all over it. Arturo wondered if the terrorists had stolen the furniture, but decided that they, probably bought it. Less risky, especially if you were invisible to robots. The clothes in the chest of drawers were women's mediums. Standard mall fare, jeans, comfy sweatshirts, and sensible shoes. Another kind of invisibility cloak. Everything else was packed and gone, which meant that he was looking for a nondescript mall bunny and a little girl, carrying a big bag enough for toiletries and whatever clothes she'd taken, and whatever she'd entertained herself with. Magazines, books, a computer. If the latter was Eurasian, it could be small enough to fit in her pocket. You could build a positronic brain pretty small and light if you didn't care about the 3 laws. The nearest exit sign glowed a few meters away, and he moved towards it with a fatalistic sense of hopelessness. Without the department backing him, he could do nothing. But the department was unprepared for an adversary that was invisible to robots. And by the time they finished flaying him for breaking procedure and got to work on finding his daughter, she'd be in Beijing or Bangalore or Paris, somewhere benighted and sinister behind the Iron Curtain. He moved to the door, put his hand on the crash bar, and then turned abruptly. Someone had moved behind him very quickly, a blur in the corner of his eye. As he turned, he saw who it was, his ex-wife. He raised his hands defensively, and she opened her mouth as though to say, "Oh, don't be silly, Artie. Is this how you say hello to your wife after all these years?" And then she exhaled a cloud of choking gas that made him very sleepy, very fast. The last thing he remembered was her hard metal arms catching him as he collapsed forward. End of Part 2. If you enjoyed this performance, please subscribe to Auditory Entertainments.